Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
Walmart employees, what's the worst thing you have seen inside your store? Episode 2. Honestly, the worst thing I saw working at Walmart was the absolute garbage leadership. I don't like to spread sad things about places I've worked, but I can't find many good things to say about this company. I was CAP 2 for those who know. If you're CAP, you feel the pain too. I worked for the company from June 2017, leaving my small grocery gig in favor of WM's better pay, to just 2 weeks ago. I have never in my life seen a more toxic leadership culture. And I'm not the only one that's seen it. I unfortunately have many stories of bad management, unsafe practices, retaliation for whistleblowing, broken laws, etc. But there is one story in particular that sticks out and is both the angriest I have ever been and the most fulfillment I have ever gotten out of helping somebody when they needed it. We had a new manager come in at one point, and he was fine at first. Then, I had to take a couple of weeks off for some military training. Entire other story there about how the management tried to break the law and then cover it up when I called them out on it up to the regional level. I fought up the home office and won. When I got back from training, the guys at work were all on edge and they absolutely hated this guy. I thought he couldn't be that bad since he was fine a month ago. He was worse. He would randomly send people home or discipline them if they didn't agree with everything he said. He changed our schedule and our workflow/tasks. So, everybody was thrown off of their routine. Keep in mind that a lot of these people are not very well off and need this job. He wanted yes men working for him. We had this worker Bob who had these thick glasses. Bob was not financially secure at all. Bob struggled, and while he may not have been the best worker, he was a hard worker and would go to the ends of the earth for you. Bob hit his head on a light by the loading dock at one point and one of the lenses in his thick glasses fell out and underneath the ramp of the dock. Bob immediately started to freak out because he could barely afford to live, much less a new pair of glasses. The bad manager comes running in and yells at the kid for being so clumsy. He starts poking around with a yardstick under the ramp to find the lens and won't hear any suggestions from anybody. Bob is begging anybody to just reach under and grab it. This is mildly unsafe, but if the ramp is propped up it would be fine. The bad manager tells Bob that it's absolutely unsafe for him to work and Bob has to go clock out. Bob doesn't have a ride home. Bob is nearly in tears by now because he needs the hours. Keep in mind he still can see out of one eye. Manager says go clock out. You can sit in the break room or in the parking lot, but you can't be in here working. I offer to help get the lens out after watching the bad manager try to scrape it out with a yardstick. The bad manager yelled at me and started a timer on his watch. He says if I don't figure this out in 20 minutes, too bad. He'll just be shut out of luck. If anybody sits back here and tries to help me, I'm firing them. I am absolutely floored at this point. The bad manager fails miserably at trying to get this lens out. Meanwhile, I went and told my direct supervisor what was going on. After the BM's 20-minute timer ran out, my sup and I ran over, propped up the ramp and recovered the lens in about 20 seconds. I took it out to the parking lot and called for Bob. He came literally sprinting up to me and gave me a big bear hug and thanked me, still borderline in tears. Bad manager didn't care about this guy. I didn't need the job as bad as he did, so I put my ass on the line and got him his license back. Walmart management, in my experience, from store ASM, COs, up to market HR/market manager, does not care about their employees. You only get a voice if you kiss ass or if you spend over 10 years with the company. Bob still thanks me for helping him out a year ago this coming month. I cannot honestly recommend that anybody work there in the CAP2 position unless they absolutely need a job. I work at store standards at my local Walmart. One day, while I was returning from my lunch break after getting something to eat at a pizza place near the store, I've seen 2 police cars in front of the foodside entrance with their lights flashing. From what I've heard, there were 2 punks playing with airsoft guns behind the store, when a passerby called the police on the 2. Now keep in mind, that airsoft guns are made to be indistinguishable from real guns. From what I've heard, they then had the brains, or lack thereof, and balls to enter the store with their airsoft guns holstered invisible in the waists their pants, which made a lot of customers feel scared. The police managed to stop and arrest the 2 after they'd entered the store. Nobody got hurt, and the 2 are facing charges. This was a store in Canada, so gun control laws here are a lot stricter than down in the States, and people tend to be more nervous when they are seen outside the hands of people like hunters, law enforcement, or military. I forgot to add this detail, but I've seen a picture of the guns seized in the local newspaper a couple of days later from when this happened. They resembled Colt M1911 pistols. Plus, that's the problem with airsoft or replica airguns. Because they resemble their real bullet-firing equivalents, and you can't tell if the orange tips are either the plastic muzzle on a real airsoft gun, or painted on the muzzle of a real gun, people just don't want to take any chances if they're visibly seen. Was an electronics associate a little after Black Friday. My old store was a high theft area, so a lot was locked up, and guy asks to see a TV that was on a stack base. I show him it and tell him some specs about it, and he seemed interested and said he wanted it. So I told him I was going to go to the back to get the one he wanted, but he said no, I want this one right here. So I went ahead and unlocked the spider wrap around it, and I was originally going to bring it to the counter to ring him up. But he helped me pick it up, 65-inch, and proceeds to tug it and put it in his cart and slowly began walking away. I tell him that I have to ring it up at the electronics counter. AP manager at the time was on our ass that if you needed to unlock it then take it to the register and don't hand them it. And he proceeds to tell me that no he don't and walks away. Immediately I knew he probably was going to try to steal it, so I walk up to him and tell him again, but says I'm being racist. Usually when they say something along this line I already know what's about to go down, so I go tell my manager to tell AP that the customer does not want to pay at the counter and he is acting at ill sus. Me and my manager walk back up to him and tell him once again that AP was coming and that he needed to pay at the counter, and he then looks dead into my soul and tells me he has a gun. I've seen my fair share of crazy thing happen at Wally World, but being threatened with a gun was my first LOL. Manager that was with me was speechless but immediately told AP the situation, so they were posted up at every single exits and police is called. Guy then attempts to make a dash at the grocery doors, but gang of Walmart workers are already there and grab the TV, and guy is trying to fight everyone but runs out the door when he realizes that he isn't getting that TV. We saw him jump into a white truck that was posted up right in front of the doors, and we never see him again. It's safe to say that he probably didn't have a gun with him that day, but nevertheless a crazy day. Undoubtedly the worst thing I have seen happen tonight. 2 women came into the store. One was pregnant and had her 3-year-old son with her. They tried to steal about $1,000 worth of baby formula. Drug addicts will sell it to buy drugs. After we catch them and take them back to the security room, the little boy has to go to the bathroom, so we allow his mom to take him, and she just starts screaming at him for no reason at the top of her lungs. Once the police arrive, we discovered that she actually had 2 more kids, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old that she had left in the car. The car was off the whole time, in the summer heat. We find the car and see these 2 kids aren't even in car seats, just buckled up. The mom refuses to give us the keys to get them out, so we had to call in the fire department to get them out and an ambulance to make sure they were okay. This whole time we can tell the women are strung out on some kind of drug because they are both just laughing the whole time and don't seem to grasp what is going on. Keep in mind one of them was quite obviously pregnant at the time. Meanwhile the kids are all terrified and crying because they have no idea what is going on and don't understand why they are being taken from their mom. Needless to say, Child Protective Services were called in to take the kids after they got all clear from the EMTs. The women were hauled off in a police cruiser and the kids were taken away in a van by CPS. I'm not sure what happened to the kids, but I sure hope they never end up back with those awful women again. I've only worked there for a few years, yet I have several stories. I've been yelled at by a customer for simply walking behind them back to the photo where I work. I was asked if I was anti-American because I have bright blue hair. I've seen an old lady lean off her mart cart and take a shot in the main aisle of the store, the one in front of the only set of doors. There was one older guy found dead outside our store from huffing canned air, and another lady who'd steal merchandise to sell to support her own canned air habit. She'd huff it in the bathrooms or the parking lot and let her 2 toddlers run wild and unsupervised. I believe they have since been taken away from her and she's banned from at least our store for life. Countless people have used the family restroom for quick drug fixes, or to put on clothes or shoes they intend to steal. Some have left old, nasty shoes hanging on the hooks where the stolen ones had been. We've had people in mart carts run into employees, other customers, or fixtures, because they didn't care to stop or move out of the way. And the amount of people who've tried to print copyrighted photos and try to hide those, so we don't catch them are insane. I worked at Walmart for a year when I was 18. We used to let certain people sleep in the store when it was extremely late, specifically this one older woman in a motorized scooter, so when we saw them sleeping we wouldn't bother them. Well, it hit 7 o'clock in the morning and she's usually up and about by 5:30, so my coworker and I went to go check up on her, and she was dead. I didn't work at Walmart long after, and people are no longer allowed to sleep in the store. I live in an area with pretty decent Walmarts. Nothing like you sees online usually, but central Wisconsin isn't really a hive that attracts the likes of, say, downtown Milwaukee Walmarts. Anyway, one Sunday morning our maintenance associate called in and I was one of 2 male managers currently running the store. A lady had tried to get out of her electric cart to go to the bathroom but had unfortunately lost her bowels along the way. After she left, I washed and sanitized the cart and women's bathroom solo. A trail leading from the cart into the front bathroom. I will never forget this. I worked in the shoe department. We were a few feet away from the hair salon. Whenever someone got a perm, it smelled like burnt hair basically. It was nauseating. Anyway, one night, when the salon was closed, this guy and what seems to be his daughter come in looking for shoes. I've never seen feet so grotesque before. They were bloated and black and green and oozing pus. I hadn't known what diabetes was back then, but it was clearly an out-of-control case of gangrene looking back on it. It smelled like death. Close to the burnt hair smell of the salon, really, but somehow even worse. You could smell it from a dozen feet away. They insisted on trying shoes. The largest we carried was a 13EE, which was clearly too small for him. He wanted to try the shoes on without socks. I tried to get him to put on some peds at least, little nylon footies. He tried but couldn't reach them around his foot. His daughter got angry at me for not putting them on him. I was not going anywhere near his dead feet. He tried to get some shoes on. It failed miserably. I made myself scarce. Finally, they left, and I post-backed all of the shoes he tried on, now stained with oozing pus, as defective/damaged goods. For a few weeks after, every time the salon did a perm, I had vivid flashbacks to this guy and his gross feet. Eventually I quit the job because I couldn't handle that anymore. This was 20 years ago. I still can't stand the sight of my feet. Foot fetishes are quite frankly disgusting to me. I am literally scared of this. I work AP at Walmart right now, so I've seen some crazy stuff with access to all the videos. The craziest thing to me has been the case of a couple who just couldn't wait. They strolled down a lonely hardware aisle. The female proceeds to get on her back and take off the bottoms, holding her knees with her hands. The man accepts the invitation and the two go at it. The best part about the entire situation was another older male customer walked past the aisle and came to a halt a few paces after as if he couldn't believe what he just saw. So, he proceeds down the further end of the aisle next to the couple still going at it and peeks around and continues to watch them till they have finished. You're welcome. All this happens in SWVA, so throw in a cliché southern accent to everything. Had a woman at the end of my shift smoking a cigarette. I asked her to put it out. She gets angry, says it's a free country and runs off. Another customer comes up to me a few minutes later and says a woman is leaned over and looks sick in the shoes department. I go check on the problem. Cigarette lady is there bent over those little seats you sit on to try on shoes. Kneeling in the floor, white powder on her nose. She looks at me, vomits a mix of bile, powder, and what smelt like 3-day-old Taco Bell, then takes off like a wild animal. My replacement shows up. I have a mop in hand ready to go and just push it into his, and I'm like, good luck. On my way out of the store I see some of the cashiers are freaking out. I go over and the police officers come out of the ladies' bathroom as I get close. Cigarette lady is fighting and cussing between two officers. One of the managers comes out next with a can of compressed air, a 6-pack of beer, and a pack of washcloths. I found out later she was jacked up on a few things and luckily did get some much needed help after a good mental health checkup. Someone died while I was working. I was a cart pusher at a Walmart for 9 years, and in the last year I was there, an old man fell down in the foyer, that space between the entrance and the store proper, where the vending machines in Constar are located. His wife was hysterical, begging God not to take him from her. I'd been in the restroom when it first happened, so when I got out and heard her screaming, I at first assumed that she was the one who'd been hurt, as loud as she was. Anyway, ambulance gets there, and you could hear it in the EMT's voices even though they were telling her they would do all they could, and they started chest compressions and took vitals, that this man was dead. When they took her with him in the ambulance she was crying and praying, and it was all very disturbing and surreal. Third shifter here. I work overnight at a supercenter that, while not a horrible store, it's also not in the greatest of areas, so I've got a few I could talk about. Most recently, I was stocking in our pet department. I know all stores are different in layout. Our pet department is in the back next to electronics and the photo lab, which also happens to be where the back bathrooms and the family restroom are. Well, I saw a couple go into our family restroom, which is fairly normal in case one or the other needs help with something. I don't know a person's story or personal issues, and it's not my job to ask, so I go about restocking everything with my coworker. After 15 minutes of them being in the bathroom, my coworker and I joke how they were either in there humping or shooting up. I decided to walk up to the door and not claiming I was our maintenance crew and we had to clean the bathroom, so they had to hurry up. They said they were almost done, so I walked away. Another 5 minutes later the couple walks out finally and walks away like nothing happened. Being the curious employee that I am, I go to the restroom to check to see if they were opening packages and stealing or whatever. When I opened the door, there was blood all over the floor, sprayed up the wall, and smeared in the sink where it looked like they tried to clean up at least the sink. I looked in the trash, using a glove because God knows what is in there, risking fentanyl contact. This is in Ohio, so you probably know how expansive the drug problem is in this state, and when I turned over what ended up being a spoon, there was what I assumed I interrupted them using. They also left their restraint on the floor behind the toilet. At that point I called in my manager, who had to call the police officers in by company policy when drugs are found, and I was made to block the family bathroom so no one would go in. Cops checked the bathroom, and between the rest of the trash can and the little feminine hygiene trash thing by the toilet, they found a total of 3 syringes, used, a pack of our spoons they took off the shelf to cook with, and a tiny bag of heroin. Nothing really happened beyond that, and the police officers took what they found to destroy it, and our actual maintenance people came in to clean and sanitize the bathroom. Like I said, I live in central Ohio and a lot of my area has a slight drug problem and assumes that Walmart bathrooms are apparently the safe place to sue their stuff. Tell her people getting wasted in bathrooms and causing a biohazard issue. 2. I've personally had my life threatened by people because I tell them they can't ride the bikes and skateboards in the store. We're talking grown-ass adults in their mid to late 30s, trying to ride stuff like the tricycles. People always got to try to act like hard asses when they get in trouble for knowing they were in the wrong. Especially in front of their, normally cracked out, baby mamas. 3. Not seen by me directly but heard about Black Friday one year where a guy punched a kid that had to be in his teens over in Spock's and Spock's staff. It's not that important. 4. A couple of thieves get in trouble stealing at our self-checkouts. When they realized they were in trouble, they tried to run out the door pushing our elderly door greeter over. Luckily, she was okay. It ended up totaling around $1,000 worth of stuff. We run training receipts to get a total of the attempted theft. I could understand if it were some foods and they didn't have enough for home for kids or something like that, but it wasn't even stuff that they would actually need. I think there was like $300 to $400 worth of makeup and then a few external hard drives and a couple high-end scientific calculators. 5. In relation to the last one, in the way of thieves, I've watched, and helped stop, a guy that took some stuff from our electronics department and stuffed it under a baby before trying to leave. The mother claimed to not know the guy was doing that, but they were all some of our regulars. I had to file a police report since I was involved. Went to court and he didn't show. Got subpoenaed again and he pleaded guilty to the felony theft while also pleading guilty to the charge he got notice that got him to be pulled to court. Last I heard, he's still in there. Apologies for formatting and such. First time posting on here. Feel free to correct me if I messed anything up. My store manager. This was 20 years ago and my first real job. I had been there for a while. I've always been the type or person to learn as much as I can about the place I'm working at, especially when dealing with the public. I don't want to look like an idiot for not knowing something. Anyway, I was covering a lunch for someone in another department, layaway, I think. I needed help from a manager because I didn't know how to do something. I got the store manager, and she says she's busy and can't help me. I explain to her what's going on and she just gives me attitude. I tell the customer they'll have to come back in a bit when the person is back from lunch. This was at the end of my shift, so after this I punched out and walked to the front to vent at one of my friends. I said the store manager was giving me attitude and not helping with the customer. Even though this was just Walmart, I still take pride in my work, so 19-year-old me was pretty angry. I was also very unobservant as the store manager was right behind me listening to me. She asked me if there was something wrong and I turned around a bit shocked. I repeated myself more professionally and voiced my frustration with her lack of help. The surprising part is that I was not disciplined at all. I'm guessing she knew I was right, and she's lost her job. I walked out of that hole a few months later. One manager was all over me to stay in my department since it had a cash register, and someone had to be close to prevent theft. Literally 2 minutes later, the head cashier calls me and says I need to go up front to help out with long lines. This was the latest in a lengthy line of sad things management had done, and the lack of them communicating with each other was obnoxious. This conversion happened a few times prior. I just walk in back, punch out, and leave to never return. Walmart employee here, worked there about 7 years ago. I knew the guy who worked asset protection. He showed me a blip recorded on a security camera in the electronics area. At about 11 the night before, there was a tall young guy wearing gym shorts walking down an aisle with a toddler in the front of the cart. He stops cold, looks around, shifts around a lot, then stands up straight. After a second he pushes the cart forward a couple of feet before stopping again, at which point he lifts his leg and shakes it a lot. A lovely cluster of shameless poops flew out from the opening on his gym shorts, and he just walked out like nothing even happened. His toddler watched the whole thing too. It's gross, but I laughed so hard when I saw it. I worked for Walmart for just shy of 3 years while getting my degree. One thing that will always stick with me is that one day while I was stocking the meat wall, a young mother was shopping with her son. Kid couldn't be over 5 years old, but I noticed something pooling around his feet. He peed all over himself and on the floor. The mom just gave me this look like she expected me to call someone to clean it. Hate that. I told her to wait there so I can get something to clean it up. She wiped it up but just left the kid to walk around while she finished shopping. The best of the worst, while I was working in toys one night a dude came in with his 2 kids and set them loose to keep them entertained. Walked over to the electronics department, grabbed a can of air duster, came back to toys, automotive department which is close to toys, got high off his tits and was staggering out of the department when he face planted into an end cap of shelves. Got up, staggered to the front end to return the air duster and was promptly arrested as a manager watched the whole thing. The worst of the worst, while I was a front-end cashier I went to use the front-end men's bathroom only to find the toilet and floor covered in shit. That's bad enough. But sitting in the middle of the toilet bowl was a phone box that had been opened and stolen. Needless to say, the scam, floor maintenance manager, and AP officer were thrilled by my discovery. Poor floor crew guy had a look on his face like he was questioning his very existence. Around 7 years ago when I worked at a Walmart in the frozen/dairy department, me and a friend were working in the cooler when we started hearing yelling coming from the back. We exit the cooler, walk down the hall and see the assembler for our store yelling down a hallway telling someone to leave and get out of the back area. Turns out a drunk customer had wandered into the back room looking for the bathroom, was told we didn't have one back here and would need to go back out into the main store, and was given directions to the bathroom. My first job was at Walmart pushing carts. Every Sunday a very fat middle-aged woman would park in the handicap spot and flag down the first employee who walked by, usually me, and demand a motorized cart be brought to her. Reasonable. But usually, the carts were charging and frequently they would be extremely low on charge because people don't return them. So, every single Sunday she'd demand a manager, who would come out and tell her she had to wait, up to a couple of hours. After yelling for a bit, she'd sit in her car and fume for hours, all the while harassing us until we brought her a cart. Miserable woman. I worked in return, so rather than seeing the worst thing, I think I smelled the worst thing. People would try to get away with returning most anything, of course. But there was a family there returning a rather large TV. They insisted it was less than 90 days. And it was. That makes this even grosser. That TV, and the customers, smelled so strongly of smoke, dirt, and cat urine that I had to run outside for fresh air. I don't remember if we accepted the return or not, but I remember using an entire can of Lysol up there afterward and having to smell stench and Lysol for the next few hours. That smell literally brought tears to my eyes. There were some disturbing things that happened at the store too. Drunk worker peeing themselves and stripping their wet clothes off at the registers, man pleasuring himself and ejaculating onto a worker's back in the middle of an aisle, and at least one stabbing and one murder, but those always seemed to happen when I was on break or had just gone home for the day. I'm pretty fortunate in that regard. Wow! Finally, I can write. I've been there for about 3 months at my local neighborhood market and can say out of the brief time I've been there I've seen some weird and gross things. Being maintenance, I have to clean up under the cases of the cold meat areas and produce. With this you will see things like bugs and mold that will get found in there. Also it contains meat that will get stuck under the plastic that holds the meat on the shelf and smell terrible. On the weird side I have 2 stories. My first story is when this group of about 4 to 5 people came in and ultimately started filming with fur coats on and wearing nothing but lingerie/bikinis. While simultaneously lip-singing, one was in the cart while someone else was pushing one of the girls. The guy was filming. When asked why they were doing this they said, "Oh, we're shooting a music video. We asked them to leave unless they are buying stuff, so they did." Next happened recently when some creepy woman started bawling her eyes out when coming into the store saying, these guys were being assholes and saying I almost hit them. Being the nice guy, I was taking sympathy and talked to her while working. Basically, said everything is fine and she will be fine. Well, she ends up checking out and starts yelling at my friend who's a cashier for telling her she can't have a dog in her cart. Regardless, I turn around, put one earbud, and start working. Next thing you know she's standing right behind me staring at me. Being startled I ask, "Is there something you need?" She said no. Are you married?" Would have been normal if I were older but just 21 and she's 50-ish, but I said no hot of stardom. And asked, "Can I get your number?" I was so starstruck all I could say, "I'm sorry, I'm not looking for anything." Been a week, I think she came back in, but she said nothing and left me alone. I work as a cashier, but on occasion I'll be put as a cart pusher or maintenance. I swear to God the only time someone vomits in the store is when I'm the only one to clean it up. The worst one I've had to clean up was easily a bathroom that was full of stuff everywhere. I'm talking under the toilet, on the sides of the stall, and on the sink. It was like a kid went crazy with a brown marker. You couldn't take more than 3 steps in any direction without stepping in. It took me almost 2 hours to clean up, and after I got it done, I promptly went to my manager, who told me about the mess, to take me off of the maintenance duty. Needless to say, I'm looking for a different job. I used to work in lawn and garden, and the only thing I can think of that really stands out was more sad than bad. An old lady pulls up right to the curb in front of the gate, parks, and comes in and starts asking about hanging flower baskets. Parked on the curb in a fire lane. She goes straight to my manager to start asking about a hanging flower basket, and right away you could just tell she wasn't in a good state of mind. Kept focusing on my manager's face, stopped taking randomly, couldn't seem to keep track of the conversation. Eventually she picks out a basket of flowers and tries to go back to her car. The manager reminds her she has to pay for them and gently walks her to the register. Takes a few tries for her to remember how her credit card worked, but she buys the flowers. At this point, we've all noticed her and we're all really concerned. I don't know if she had some sort of disease, or medication was messing with her or what, but we were all really worried about her just leaving alone. When she gets to her car, she gently pulls away and starts swerving, at around 3 miles per hour, to the exit. She actually bumped into the guardrail at the edge of the parking lot, and by this point we had had enough. My coworker and I both called the police. She got through to them first, and they sent out a patrol car to check on her. But by this point she had actually gotten out of the parking lot and onto the main road, so I don't know how it ended. I like to imagine the police officers gently pulled her over and called her caretaker to come get her, and everyone ended up fine, but I don't know that for sure, and it still makes me sad that I don't know how that ended. Not an employee, but a very frequent Walmart shopper. All the Walmarts around me are pretty nice, never seen anything nasty going on. But there was an incident once that still sticks with me to this day. When I was younger, my mom had to grab med at Walmart in the middle of a storm. It wasn't a bad storm or anything, just very rainy with some thunder, but it was supposed to continue for several days, so of course the store was packed. So, we were in line at the in-store pharmacy, and there was a man who was clearly mentally disabled, with a helper, in the front of the line. The man between us and them was this man who in my young mind must have been a lawyer, did not fit the stereotypical Walmart look at all, wearing an expensive-looking suit, perfectly gelled hair, literally carrying a briefcase. He looked annoyed that he was there at all. He intensely reminded me of Patrick Bateman, just an air of disinterest and arrogance, and was brushing his coat off every time anyone walked too close to him. Everything's fine, and the guy and his helper at the front of the line get their prescriptions and start to turn around. Just as they do, there's a huge thunderclap and suddenly, the power goes out in the store. It's not pitch black, but it's dark as hell, and immediately there's commotion in line. I look up just in time to witness disabled man punch lawyer man square in the face. Lights flicker, come back on. Lawyer man is standing there holding his bloody nose looking like he's ready to murder someone, disabled guy is freaking out, helper is profusely apologizing and trying to help lawyer guy. Lawyer guy waves him off with a glare, walks to the front and calmly says his name info and throws down some money. The pharmacist hands him prescription, which he snatches wordlessly and turns away, brushing past me still holding his nose, leaving a trail of blood on the linoleum floor. I don't know why, but the entire thing felt so surreal I still remember it like it just happened. Wildest thing I've ever seen in Walmart. Not an employee, but I'm glad I wasn't for this one. One fateful afternoon, my bladder decided that it needed relief, so I ducked into the restroom while I was in my local Walmart. The two urinals were out of order, which left the handicapped accessible stall and the regular stall. Someone was in the regular stall, so I opened the door to the handicapped stall and saw what I can only describe as the aftermath of an explosion. There was chocolate pudding consistency sit on the floor, the seat of the toilet, the wall behind the toilet, on the toilet paper dispenser, everywhere. It looked like someone had stood with their pants down, bent over and starting spinning while letting forth like some sort of scatological lawn irrigation fountain. My bladder would have to wait. As I gently made my way out of the restroom, making a mental note to burn the shoes I was wearing that day, I saw a kindly-looking older man in a yellow vest pushing a cleaning cart towards the entrance to that hellhole of vile human excrement and villainy. I'm not a religious man, but I offered up whatever good vibes I could muster for that man's surely soon-to-be crushed soul that day. Not an employee, but I felt really bad for one. My brother was at Walmart with my friend and me. We were looking through pet stuff and there was an aisle with plungers at the end. Being the 13-year-old he was, my brother could not resist the temptation of picking one up and sticking it to the floor. We laughed a little. After he does this, he goes to put it back, and the whole rack falls down. He's frantically trying to place all the plungers back as my friend and I are running away and cackling. Then, an employee walks up and starts to help him. Apparently the whole shelf, 3 racks of plungers, was unstable, and as they were putting the last few on, the racks above clattered to the ground and now there are probably 50 plungers rolling around on the floor. My friend and I are dying watching from the clothing section. The employee just puts his head down, sighs, and tells my brother he can just leave. We didn't get in trouble or kicked out, but I'm so sorry for that poor employee. It was funny as hell, though. Not Walmart, but a smaller local retail chain that was similar. Nothing overly crazy, but saw a few things over the years. The worst poop incident I've ever seen was when someone with explosive diarrhea went into the woman's bathroom. I was told by someone else it was nasty, so I snuck a look while my manager was cleaning it up. Not only was it all over the toilet and floor, but she managed to poop all over the adjacent wall. We're talking a solid 3 to 4 feet off the ground and a smear that went down to the floor. I still have no idea how they got it so high. I didn't witness it firsthand but saw the pictures a manager took from another store nearby where the shelf that held all of the cooking oils gave out. The floor was just one mass of oil everywhere. I've also witnessed a ton of crazy people, but the one that stuck with me the most was this woman who was returning some novelty candy at customer service while I was up there. Things like SpongeBob candy canes or weird things like that. Her reason for returning it, and I quote, "It's made in Mexico and China, and they fill it with poison." Sometime later while working in the aisles I noticed her with I'm assuming her grandson, like 4 or 5 years old, asking him, "Who do we buy from?" Only US and US allies. Not from Walmart but from when I worked at a Zellers in high school. Zellers was this department store in Canada. It was similar to Walmart. In the winter sometimes homeless people would go into the bathroom, and we'd have to kick them out. Sometimes they'd just be napping on the toilet, or they'd be drinking mouthwash. One night in winter there was a homeless guy holed up in one of the stalls. We had complaints that there was smoke and a weird smell coming from the stall. So, me and another guy had to go in and kick him out. Turns out he had been smoking meth in there. We knocked on the door, but he was just telling us to go away and wouldn't open the door. So, we unlocked it, and he was sitting on the toilet. He had some crutches next to him, so he started swinging them at us. He was angry and high, so to try to restrain him, I ended up grabbing him and dragging him out the door. He tried to come back in and was trying to fight us. It was kind of funny. Standard, not Walmart, but when I worked overnights at Kroger about a week before Christmas I was stocking the Mexican section. I was in my zone and really not paying attention. Suddenly I hear a meek voice saying, "Excuse me, but do you have a phone?" I looked up to see a rail thin woman in a yellow dress that looked like it was basically falling off. Her black hair was a mess and she only had one sock. Makeup was streaming down her face where she had been crying. My heart was racing, just because I wasn't really expecting this. People rarely speak to you overnight to begin with, and immediately upon seeing her I assumed the worst had happened. Anyways, I told her that the phone was up front, and the self-checkout lady would gladly let her use it. Now I never found out for sure, but she told our self-checkout lady that she had been at a party, got in a fight with her boyfriend and gotten kicked out or left, can't remember. She then proceeded to walk around 4 miles from the next county over to our store since it was the only place open this late. It was also in the 30s and drizzling. If you want really remarkable stories, work overnight at a grocery store. I'm not a Walmart employee but a customer. My friends and I went to pick up some house paint to paint my friend's room and were pretty excited. All went smoothly and the employee in the paint section was genuinely nice. We made small talk while waiting. We all went back to the car, paint buckets in hand. I was sitting in the back seat with one when we made a turn, and the paint lid came off and spilled everywhere. What's ironic about this is that, before even getting to paint I said, I swear, if I get one drop of paint on me I'm going to be so pissed. Then an hour later a whole bucket of house paint spilled all over the car interior and my brand new Victoria's Secret leggings. I went and covered in paint and the guy just asked, "What happened?" I explained and he just looked at me like I was stupid. The manager didn't even know what to do until I told them to help me clean it off. What dumbasses. They thought I was the one who pried the lid off because there's no way a Walmart employee could do anything wrong. My leggings were then thrown away because the paint never came out and my friend's mom forced Walmart to pay for cleaning out friend's car. It's a famous story now at Walmart and with my friends. I wasn't working but my husband and I went to Walmart like 2 days before Christmas. Super packed parking lot, so we parked in the back next to a massive conversion van. Go in and not long after seeing a few people walking around. We finish shopping, head to the car and sure enough it's the same people right next to us shooting up in the back of the van. We quickly called the police officers and they swarmed. I felt guilty but did that at home. They could barely walk, no way they could drive.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.